Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Wednesday. Think we're gonna finish today. So it might be just a little bit longer than 10 minutes. This might go 12 or so, but we'll finish it. All right. So hopefully we had that decent discussion about what happened in the day before. Hopefully we said something like, Grandpa's getting sicker. Uh, Looks like Martin's going to be getting the medicine bag today. I mean, if we finish it, he's got to get it today, and Grandpa has to die, just like we talked about. So let's get into it. I will make myself small and this big. And the last thing, actually, we read. I don't know if I'm there. The last thing we read was the mom and the daughter were kind of sent away, and we were at 63 here. My father, so this is the grandpa talking. My father, in his early manhood, grandpa began, made a vision quest. All right, so if you look at that little number 4 right there, that means there is a footnote at the bottom. These things are called footnotes. So sometimes when an author, well, since this was written so long ago, there's probably a little bit of different language used here than what we use now in modern day. So like when you get to high school, I think you still have to read a play by Shakespeare, like tons of footnotes there, because that stuff was written like 400 years ago. So it's going to be a lot of different language, a lot of footnotes here. I mean, we're dealing with like maybe a different culture from most of the readers. So a few footnotes here, not too bad. But you can see that a vision quest in Native American cultures, it's a difficult search for spiritual guidance. So almost like a religious experience, but the person has to go on a journey, a difficult journey, kind of like to test their will. All right, definitely a rite of passage. All right, make myself small, make this big, and then let's get back to where we were reading. Looking for a little 4. All right, right there. Vision quest to find a spirit guide for his life. You cannot understand how it was in that time when the great Teton Lakota were first made to stay on the reservation. So this is some of the stuff that, the American government forcing Native people to live on pretty crappy land. There was a strong need for guidance from, another footnote here, and this is literally pronounced the way it looks. Wakatanka. Almost sounds like Wakanda, but it's not. Wakantanka, the Great Spirit. So probably like the Lakota's God, the single God, like the most powerful God. But too many of the young men were filled with despair and hatred. They thought it was hopeless to search for a vision when the glorious life was gone, and only the hated confines of the reservation lay ahead. But my father held to the old ways. All right, we could pause here. Hopefully some people are thinking right there. I don't know. I'll pause it here just in case, because we have some very intelligent people. What does that remind you of? I know I'm being super vague. I'm hoping somebody said that in some of the modern day video clips we watch of reservations, like people are filled with despair. These once great people, these once great warriors that roamed the plains are now confined into really crappy living. We saw the stray dogs all over the place, houses that are falling apart. So it was even going on back then. And I don't know exactly when back then was, but I think it was before World War I. We'll get to that in a minute. So must have been like around 1900, 1910, somewhere in there, I think. Maybe a little earlier. All right, let me find my place again. He carefully prepared, 64, he carefully prepared for his quest with a purifying sweat bath. So that's part of it, like sweating out. You have to be in a teepee usually, like really hot weather. I mean, hot inside, lots of burning coals. And then he went alone to a high butte, 6. That's pronounced butte, top, to fast and pray. Okay, it's going to take me a second. but I'm going to share a picture of a butte. So this guy went up to starve himself on this thing right here. So that thing is those are pictures of buttes, not butts, buttes. And it always takes a second to go back to I got one more picture to share later, but that's a butte. All right, hang on, bear with me, please. There we go, got it. After 3 days, he received his sacred dream, in which he found, after long searching, the white man's iron. He did not understand his vision of finding something belonging to the white people, for in that time they were the enemy. When he came down from the butte to cleanse himself at the stream below, he found the remains of a campfire and a broken shell of an iron kettle. This was a sign that reinforced his dream. He took a piece of the iron for his medicine bag, which he made of elk skin years before to prepare for his quest. So now we get a little idea of what this medicine bag is. Maybe it's like containing important parts of somebody's life, maybe something like that. All right, iron. White man, iron. What's probably the biggest thing made of iron? I'll just pause there. Probably the gun, right? Probably the gun that the white people have, soldiers that are kicking them off their land. The guns. That's going to be a big persuader right there. Hey, die or stay on this land and die, or you can leave. Oh, I guess I'll leave. Probably lose some people along the way, unfortunately. Trail of Tears, you will talk about that in Mr. Bim's class. He returned to his village, where he told his dream to the wise old men of the tribe. They gave him the name Iron Shell, but they did not understand the meaning of the dream either. At first, Iron Shell kept the piece of iron with him at all times and believed it gave him protection from the evils of those unhappy days. Then a terrible thing happened to Iron Shell. He and several other young men were taken from their homes by the soldiers and sent to a boarding school far from home. We did talk briefly about this. Remember that assimilation where the soldiers, the white people, the government would kill the Indian, save the man. That was the term. So forced to cut the hair, forced to dress Western style. Assimilation, it was called. He was angry and lonesome for his parents and for the young girl he had wed before he was taken away. At first, Iron Shell resisted the teacher's attempts to change him, and he did not try to learn. One day, it was his turn to work in the school's blacksmith shop. As he walked into the place, he knew that his medicine bag had brought him here to learn and work with the white man's iron. Iron Shell became a blacksmith and worked at the trade when he returned to the reservation. All his life, he treasured the medicine bag. When he was old and I was a man, he gave it to me. So the grandfather talking about himself. And it wasn't until I reread, I always reread this before I read it in front of everybody, just so I don't mess up too badly. And I forgot, Martin and the grandfather, it's actually his great grandfather. I think there was one line at the beginning. It's like, oh, I forgot about that. So we'll learn what happens in between there. This is actually getting long, isn't it? I don't want to go too long, but we have maybe this will be a two-parter. Okay. Iron Shell became a blacksmith. Grandpa quit talking, and I stared in disbelief as he covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook with quiet sobs. I looked away until he began to speak again. I kept the bag until my son, your mother's father, was a man and had to leave us to fight in a war across the ocean. I gave him the bag, for I believed it would protect him in battle, but he did not take it with him. He was afraid he would lose it. He died in a faraway land. So I'm not sure which world war this was, but it could be, if this takes place in the 40s and 50s, if I mean, it just feels like that to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Please chime in. This would probably be like World War One, right? So the mother's father died in World War One, I think. All right. Not that it's a huge deal, but sometimes I just like to try to nail the time period. So, oh, we're almost done, right? Yeah. We can finish this today. Okay, we're almost done. If you're completely bored, don't worry. We're almost done. Again, Grandpa was still. I felt his grief around me. My son, he went on after clearing his throat, had no sons, only one daughter, your mother. So the medicine bag must be passed to you. He unbuttoned his shirt, pulled out the leather pouch, and lifted it over his head. He held it in his hand, turning it over and over as if memorizing how it looked. In the bag, he said, as he opened it and removed two objects, is the broken shell of the iron kettle, a pebble from the butte, and a piece of sacred sage. He held the pouch upside down, and fine dust drifted out. After the bag is yours, you must put a piece of prairie sage within and never open it again until you pass it on to your son. He replaced the pebble and the piece of iron and tied the bag. All right, just in case you don't know what sage is, I have another picture for you. And before I show the picture, no, it's not weed. It does look a lot like it, but it's not weed. Let me see here. Stop. You get to see me. I got to push a couple other buttons. Share this. Here's the sage. Again, not weed. But some people, I mean, you can buy this. I'll make it bigger. You can buy this like at Walmart or whatever. People cook with sage. But apparently this is like sacred sage. But I mean, it does look like weed, right? It does. All right, we're almost done here. This is going on a little longer. I'm sorry, but man, I don't know. We're stopping a lot. I'm showing pictures, but I think if I just read this, it would kind of make me emotional. Like this guy is passing on something very sacred to the grandson. Like it's almost like his last words. I don't know. Sometimes that stuff gets me choked up, but luckily not now because we've been stopping and looking at things that look almost like weed, but it's not weed. So break up the kind of the sadness, at least for me. And probably you're like, I don't care. Just get this thing over with. All right, almost done, like I said. After the bag is yours, passed on to your son. After the bag is yours, we already read that. I stood up, somehow knowing I should. Grandpa slowly rose from the bed, stood upright in front of me, holding the bag before my face. I closed my eyes and waited for him to slip it over my head. But he spoke. No, you need not wear it. Okay, so hopefully, probably Martin's like, oh, phew, I don't need to wear it. He placed the soft leather bag in my right hand and closed it with the other hand over it. It would not be right to wear it in this time and place where no one will understand. Put it safely away until you are again on the reservation. Wear it then when you replace the sacred sage. Grandpa turned and sat again on the bed. Wearily, he leaned his head against the pillow. Go, he said, I will sleep now. So when I first read this, I'm like, oh man, is the guy dying right here? Is he going to die right there? I should have made that a little bigger for you. Sorry. But you don't need to see my face as I'm reading as much. I thought right there, he's like, oh man, that was his last words. Boom. Here you go. Takes a little more time than that, but not much. So sad. Here we go. Thank you, Grandpa, I said softly and left with the bag in my hands. That night, Mom and Dad took Grandpa to the hospital. 2 weeks later, I stood alone on the lonely prairie of the reservation and put the sacred sage in my medicine bag. The end. The end. I don't know. It always, I don't like death that much, right? Nobody does. And hopefully, you haven't had to experience too much of that, but just, man, people's last wishes gets me right there, right in the feels. Something we probably don't have to talk too much about. But by the time we're done with this, you could, in theory, complete all of the questions on the Google form now for the final assessment for the medicine bag. And I will come around if anybody has any questions about it. There is now a PDF in Google Classroom. So if you don't want that paper that's in the back of the room, you can find the PDF right in Google Classroom. I'm going to put it right where the final assessment is. Okay. If you need any help with that, let me know. And then we'll get into Little Frankenbeans a little bit later.